Colin aimed a laser pointer at a woman's bikini clad butt and announced that anyone who dared to slap it would get $2,000. Vince, who had just lost his job, rushed over without a second thought and gave her but a hard smack. The group immediately got up and slipped out through the back door. Colin and Vince found the whole thing exhilarating, then jumped into the car to continue their money game. But Craig, who always did what his wife said, wanted to go home. While they were struggling with him, the bar's bouncer came charging out and aggressively grabbed Craig by the shirt.
$100 if you hit him first.
When Craig woke up, he was already at Colin's house. Colin asked his wife, Violet, to tend to Craig's injuries. The alluring Violet immediately got to work, treating him with incredible care and tenderness. When Vince followed Colin into the study to get some game supplies and drugs, he discovered a huge amount of cash inside the safe and immediately began thinking about stealing it. Back in the living room, Vince leaned over and whispered in Colin's ear, after which Colin called both men out to the balcony. Just as the conversation was getting lively, Vince suddenly unzipped his fly and peed all over Craig's shoes.
Oh, what the fuck?
Wait, come here, don't put it like that. Oh, wait, he did it.
Not only did this earn Vince $300, but it also lured Craig into the bathroom and gave the two men a chance to speak alone. After locking the door, Vince uttered 3 shocking words.
I'm gonna rob him.
At first, the honest Craig refused, but Vince said Colin was already so out of it from the substances he had taken that even if they robbed him, he would never call the police. Craig remembered that he had just lost his job and was already 2 months behind on rent, so he agreed to Vince's proposal. Once they went back outside, Vince seized the right moment and held Colin hostage while Craig entered the study and packed up the cash in the safe. As they searched for the car keys so they could leave, they discovered that Colin was a judo expert.
Those card keys.
Oh, wow.
I want to say, this was not my idea.
Fucking cool it! Take a moment! Let's all just chill for a moment, all right? Let's hit pause! Let's rewind. Okay. Want to?
Surprisingly, Colin not only left them unharmed but also revealed that the $250,000 in the safe had actually been set aside just for the two of them. It was Violet's birthday, and Colin wanted to make her happy by bringing 2 men home to play games, with the winner taking the entire $250,000. The moment they heard that, both men were fired up. Vince said he would play any game, but he would never do anything that crossed an ethical line. Colin assured him that nothing like that would happen. The first game was simple. Whoever could hold his breath the longest would win $500. The prize money would keep increasing as the games continued. Just then, Craig received a call from his wife. He had promised to be home by midnight, but it was already 2 in the morning and he was nowhere to be seen. Worried about him, his wife had called Craig's boss. After learning why her husband was out so late, she did not blame him. Instead, she worried that he might do something reckless and urged him to come home, saying they could work through their problems together. When Colin saw Craig on the phone, he offered him $300 to hang up immediately. The moment Craig heard the offer, he ended the call. Vince had held his breath for 1 minute and 58 seconds, and now it was Craig's turn. Craig was just moments away from breaking Vince's record.
Fuck, Vince!
Bail.
That got hairy.
Craig complained to Colin that Vince was cheating, but Colin said games were more exciting when there were no rules. Craig could hardly wait to begin the second round. Colin led them into the yard and pointed to a lump of chocolate on the ground. Both men thought he was going to make them eat it. Colin explained that the chocolate had been left by the neighbor's dog. He had stepped in it a few days earlier and ruined a brand new pair of flip-flops. He offered $1,200 to whoever could run into the neighbor's house, leave behind a fresh pile of chocolate, and take a photo as proof. Craig accepted the challenge without a second thought, and Vince hurried after him. Unwilling to back down, Vince reminded Craig that breaking into someone's home could land them in prison or even get them killed. But Craig no longer cared because he would be evicted if he failed to pay the rent the next day. The 2 men quickly entered the neighbor's house, pulled down their pants, and started straining. Craig turned around and noticed a girl sleeping in the room. Luckily, Craig finished first.
Good luck, man.
but the sound of him taking a photo as proof woke the sleeping girl. By the time Vince realized what was happening, the girl was already standing in the doorway. While making his escape, Vince spotted a dog tied up nearby and came up with another twisted idea. He brought the dog back to Colin's house and said that Craig's stunt meant nothing. If Colin offered enough money, Vince was willing to get rid of the dog for good. Colin refused and asked Violet to take the dog away, then condemned Vince for being so cruel and disturbed. After Colin paid out the prize for the second round, the third game officially began. Whoever made Colin a Muay cocktail first would receive $3,000. Without warning, Vince grabbed Craig by the throat and slammed him to the floor. That move earned Vince the $3,000. But Craig also found a silver lining because Violet offered to hook up with him.
I think you'd feel better if you let me fuck you.
What?
What did she just say?
Seeking excitement on her birthday, Violet had proposed playing an intimate game with a stranger. Instead of getting angry at his wife's unreasonable request, Colin pressed Craig to explain why he would not agree. The honest Craig said he only wanted to make money. Colin then offered Craig $4,500 if he agreed. He chose that amount because he had seen the eviction notice in Craig's wallet and knew Craig desperately needed $4,500 to pay the rent. In the end, Craig accepted their offer. Vince had thought he knew how to get wild, but wealthy people clearly took things to an entirely different level. After paying Craig, Colin and Violet went downstairs to get the props for the next game. Craig received another call from his wife. Now that he had enough money to cover the rent, he got up and left the house. Vince, still unsatisfied, chose to stay. When Colin and Violet returned in their new outfits and learned that Craig had left, Violet was extremely disappointed. Colin immediately opened the door and went after him, but after scanning the surrounding streets, he could not find any sign of Craig. Violet's displeasure was written all over her face. Vince had no idea what was going on. Colin explained that they preferred games with two contestants. To cheer up his wife, he offered Vince $25,000 to cut off his own pinky. After thinking it over for a moment, Vince accepted. Colin thought his wife would be thrilled, but she still wore a sour expression. Only when someone's voice came from the living room did Violet's face finally light up.
I'll cut my pinky off for $23,000.
Vince cursed at Craig for undercutting him, arguing that Craig already had enough money to cover the rent and should have left this opportunity to him. But Craig explained that both he and his wife were unemployed. The money he had would only cover the rent he already owed, so he needed to win more to support his family until he found another job. Vince, who was also unemployed, hardened his resolve and said he would do it for just $22,000.
21.
20. And if you say another word, I will knock you out.
19.
I said shut your 18.
All right.
$15,000.
Are you crazy, man? You're gonna cut off your pinky for $15,000? That's a finger.
It's not like it's gone forever. Even if it cost me $6,000 to sew it back on, that's still $9,000 more than when I woke up this morning.
All right, fine, man. If you want to mutilate yourself for $15,000, go right ahead.
In the end, Craig secured the $15,000 challenge, knowing it would cost him his pinky, but Colin ordered Vince to wield the knife. Craig immediately lost his nerve and asked to take some painkillers first. Still holding a grudge, Vince caught Craig off guard and completed the challenge in one swift motion.
Hey.
It's in here somewhere, hold on.
Oh, you okay, Craig?
Costing Craig his finger, Craig screamed in agony as if he were calling out all 18 generations of his ancestors. Violet then bandaged his wound. A short while later, Colin brought out a plate of food and began another round. Vince lifted the cover and recoiled in horror when he saw a freshly steamed white rat. When the two men hesitated, Colin raised the prize to $50,000 and announced that whoever finished first would win. Since $50,000 was more than either man earned in a year, they instantly prepared for battle. At Colin's signal, they began devouring the rat. The sight was far too beautiful to describe, so let's skip it. In the end, they finished at exactly the same time. Colin proposed a contest for the final bite and brought out the pinky Craig had given up earlier. Craig landed a hard kick that left Vince badly hurt, then glared at him and completed the final bite challenge with his own pinky. Colin and Violet remained expressionless, but inside, they were incredibly excited. Violet ultimately declared Craig the winner and awarded him the prize. After recovering, Vince lifted Craig into an over-the-shoulder throw, then repeatedly slammed his fists into Craig's head. But the game still was not over. Colin used the opportunity to call Vince outside and offered him $250,000 to kill Craig, promising to clean up the scene afterward. At first, Vince thought Colin was joking, only to realize that he was completely serious. After Colin repeatedly egged him on, Vince approached Craig from behind with a knife. Colin and Violet eagerly waited to see what he would do. In the end, Vince put the knife away. The slideshow playing inside also made him realize that the entire night's game had been planned in advance.
Let's get the fuck out of here. Well, that was grim.
While Colin and Vince had been outside, Violet had made Craig the same offer. Craig then packed up the $250,000 while Colin called a specialized cleaning company and, true to his word, allowed Craig to leave.
Good call on your boy. I thought my guy was gonna wrap it up.
To some wealthy people, even human lives are nothing more than something to bet on. Covered in injuries, Craig returned home with the huge sum of money. He would never have to worry about falling behind on rent again, and he could send his child to a good school and provide him with good food and clothes. When Craig's wife turned on the light and saw her injured husband, I think she finally understood what it meant for a man to shoulder responsibility for his family. That is the end of the movie, and the next one will be even more exciting.